On today's show, this was the week the Capitals had to show something. 3 games at home, 1 win, 2 losses, same problems. This team isn't bad, but it's not good enough. And now Chris Patrick admits it.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the state of the Capitals, and Chris Patrick's thoughts on the Capitals, as well as that injuries explain some things, but they don't excuse everything. A bit later in the show, we'll talk about the Caps have to make a move, and they know it. But just to get it going here, talking about, yes, you guessed it, another loss by your favorite team and mine, the Capitals. And it's beginning to turn into a bit of a trend here. That they can't win games consistently, right? And it seems like a broken record. I've come to you guys on many occasions talking about what's going wrong with this team. And I also hear it. You're being too hard on the team. Okay. I mean, do you want me to tell you that the Capitals are playing well when they're not? I don't think that I'm coming to you guys as candidly and honestly as I possibly can. I understand that there are injuries. That explains part of it, right? But it's not the total package. And what we saw from the Capitals yesterday was kind of just exemplifies and epitomizes who this team is right now. As there was a goal that was washed off the boards because of offsides and those kind of things, playing at home at Cap One, it seemed like it kind of took the Capitals' momentum out of the game, because I felt like had that goal stayed on the board, I'm not saying they would have won, but they could have, because momentum is not something that's easily quantifiable. It's confidence, right? It's the guy that asked the girl out on the date and she says yes instead of no. All of a sudden you have a skip in your step. You're feeling more confident about yourself. So that's where the Capitals are at. I think that they're struggling with confidence for sure. So let's just get into it. What went wrong in the game last night versus Florida? And start here, because this is the truth, whether people like it or not. This was the week, not a week, the week to get it right. They were playing at home as they are headed out on a treacherous West Coast trip that's going to be very late. I know you Capitals fans are going to love that, being on the East Coast, that it's going to be difficult to watch these games to completion. But this was the week to get it done, playing at home. And, I know that they're playing against Florida and you know how great they are, but 3 games at home, a chance to finally string wins together before a brutal season-long 6-game road trip. And what did we see? What was it? A successful homestand here? Did you walk away from it feeling like the Capitals are in a better position? Because what happened? 1 overtime win against Montreal, 2 losses, including 1 to the Sharks again, and a 5-2 loss to Florida that honestly wasn't as close as the score looks. And, it's hard. It's follow the bouncing ball with this team, right? Win, lose, win, loss, win, loss. And the Capitals are struggling, and it's about having the answer. And it appears right now that the Capitals do not have the answer on how to turn the ship around. And this wasn't the Capitals' chance to change the narrative of the season, or it was rather, and instead they doubled down on inconsistency. And, the feeling is, and I try to be a glass half full guy in my life if I possibly can. Like, this is the team made some adjustments, right? We saw some adjustments to the line combinations and these kind of things that maybe this is going to work, right? This is the one that's going to kind of push him out of the ditch and get him back on the road. But the Caps, they look like a team to me that's still searching. Connor McMichael scores off the rush early, finally some life, and boom, it gets wiped offsides in an offsides challenge. And honestly, it was the right call, but the moment mattered. And I was talking about momentum earlier. I was talking about confidence, because what did we see after that? Florida takes over. And why? It's what good hockey teams do. That's why they have won the Stanley Cups that they have won here recently. Shots 14-4 Florida. Expected goals 1.9 to 0.84 Panthers. That's domination. And, oftentimes when you look at these games, it's like, well, the goalie must have been subpar in this game. You take a look at the final 5-2. And I'm not here to say that, Logan Thompson was perfect, but saves 26 of 29. He kept them in the game longer than they deserved. Because if we want to drill down to more of a granular level, shots on goal, 31-24 in favor of Florida. Power play for the Capitals was 0 for 1. And, it's those kind of things that kind of put you in the position that you're in. Because like I say, A.J. Greer scores in the first period. Jacob Chikrin counts some 2 goals. The new father had that extra spring in his step, scores goal number 16 and 17 of the season, but not enough. As the Florida Panthers had their own firepower that they answered back. Sam Bennett and Balinskis ultimately turned to be too much for the Capitals to handle. But what you saw from Chikrin, like I said, scoring the 2 goals, even that wasn't enough. It was clutch. It was Chikrin doing what he could do to drag the Capitals back into the fight. But even that was not enough. Because just 1:36 after Chikrin scores, gives them the lead, Florida ties it. Then Ovi takes a delay of game penalty. Then Florida scores again. And when you take a look at it, that is ultimately the Capitals right now in a nutshell. And then you have questions out there, right, about players that are out there. And I understand the who, the what, the where. What, you got Hendrik Slaughter, who skated like 6.5 minutes in the game, right? That he's just a place warmer in my estimation until a lucrative trade comes along so they can trade him. Because what do we know? That he simply cannot get sent to Hershey. He would have to clear waivers. And also, the Capitals are banged up, so they need bodies in the mix. So it is a tough moment for this team, because every time the Caps grab momentum, they hand it right back. And sometimes it's by design, or, sometimes it's poor play, and sometimes it's what I'm going to say unlucky. The offsides thing, I guess I'm going to put in the column of unlucky. But it is what it is. And the Capitals, to make it very vanilla, can't catch a good break here. And the big thing of it is, and that's making it very simple. I mean, we know what's wrong. It's poor play on the ice. It's sloppy play on the ice. And the teams that do it well, like the Florida Panthers, that kind of proves the case. And if you want to see what do the Capitals need to change to win games, well, kind of just watch watch the replay of what Florida did. That's what the Capitals need to do. And part of it is they don't have the personnel, right? And that's the big thing. But the good teams find a way to win games that they probably shouldn't. And this is a game that would have definitely been a nice momentum boost for this team. Because now, in a lot of ways, they're left reeling. Because what's on deck? Well, what is on deck is afternoon match. Monday, today, depending on when you're listening to this, they are playing Colorado. Last checked, the most points in the NHL. Then they have the Canucks, Flames, Oilers, and Kraken after that. So, if there is another opportunity for this team to make things right, Colorado, really early take. If the Capitals could win that game, wow, that, and when we talk about wins, losses, those kind of things, that could change the momentum big time. It's going to be a tough one. I'm going to say that one, the Capitals probably will not win. I know, I don't want to say it out loud, but the Canucks not playing very well. The Flames, those are two games I could circle as the Capitals winning. The Oilers and all the firepower there could be tough. So the Capitals are going to really have to batten down the hatches. The Kraken, kind of a toss-up. But this game, these games after the last stretch here were ultimately kind of squandered opportunities, in my opinion. They need to make the most of these opportunities before things get kind of out of hand here. It's still a tight Metropolitan Division. Carolina is kind of running away with it. And I understand that you don't need to win the Metro to do great things, but it definitely helps. So we take a look at it. We hope that we get more players back. And, I know Pierre-Luc Dubois is out here a bit, but that's all we can kind of do right now is hope. Hope that Wilson coming back will give the boost this team needs, sort of, these kind of guys to help put the Capitals back into victory lane. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about injuries explain some things, but they don't excuse everything. Straight ahead. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Every game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like the most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boost gives your team more juice on the bets that you already like instead of forcing to bet something new. So listen, if you're a fan of regional teams here, well, our teams aren't playing in it, but say you want vested interest in all the games that are going on. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, those games get that much more exciting because you make picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL game day. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not done so already, go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. One more time, lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. You get access to an ad-free version of Locked On Capitals compatible with Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. An invite to members-only Locked On Everyday Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of Locked On Capitals. So go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. I just got done wrapping up an interview with Hockey Troll from the Caps Chirp podcast, something that's only available to the Locked On Capitals Everydayer All Access members. So check it out, lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in segment 2 here, I alluded to towards the end of segment 1 about injuries and the impact that they have on this team. And it's not that I'm not seeing it. It's not that I don't think it's a thing. Because when you don't have a guy like Tom Wilson who leads the team in goals in there, that's rough. Plus your minus pro, Sortif, Chikrin from time to time here, that those definitely play an impact in how the Capitals are performing. Wilson, I would say, is of the most impact, of course, right? But the good teams, they find a way to still win games. So while I put some weight into the injury thing, I mean, you'd be foolish not to. I think that you're giving too much rope, if you will, or too much of an excuse as why the Capitals are not playing well. Because you saw how well the Capitals played last season with Alex Ovechkin out of the mix. We thought that was curtains for Ovi's chase, right? And we thought that was curtains for maybe the Capitals season. How the Capitals going to win without Ovi? That they found a way to do it. So let's dive into it here in segment 2 here, that injuries explain some things. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Chris Patrick had a presser on Friday. And that was must see for me. I really wanted to watch that. And Chris Patrick made it very clear. He said, quote, Halloween, we lose Pierre-Luc. That kind of started the adversity, unquote. And Pierre-Luc Dubois, right? A big impact, that second line center, a guy that was a mismatch out in LA, Caps trade Kemper out there. We get Pierre-Luc Dubois, met to wide skepticism in NHL circles. And what was he last year? Huge during the regular season. Not so much in the postseason, but same thing goes for a lot of the different players in the postseason, in particular round number 2. But Pierre-Luc Dubois, definitely a big impact. And he's not wrong, because Pierre-Luc Dubois, gone since October, needed surgery. But like I said, if you're putting all your eggs in the Pierre-Luc Dubois basket to fix this team, I think you're going to be disappointed, because he will make an impact, but we don't know what version of PLD we're going to see on the ice. He missed a substantial amount of time. And if memory serves, it was a similar procedure done that Brooks Laich had, right? If you guys are a longtime Capitals fan, you remember Brooks Laich, and he never really came back the same player. So that's something to consider. What PLD? I know that he's getting in some work, but kind of a wait and see approach. And he's not wrong. Like I said, gone since October. Alexei Protas, we know, missed some time. Tom Wilson missed time. Justin Sordoff out after stepping up. And, Sordoff, you take a look at him, kind of far exceeded my expectations. I like that one. I'm surprised, if you will, at a player. I knew that he was good. Chris Patrick was definitely drinking the Kool-Aid on him. Started the season on the 4th line, has stepped up, played a huge role on the 2nd line, takes a puck to the face, and is facing some setbacks. But, so those are big things. And I get that. That's a brutal stretch of attrition down the middle and on the wings. But Patrick also said this, and I think this is especially important, quote, tired players make more mental mistakes, unquote. And they do. And that's all things to factor in. I'm not trying to sweep that under the rug, and you can see it out on the game. You saw it against Florida. Missed assignments, sloppy puck management, late reactions in the defensive zone. But for me, and this is where I push back a little bit, and if you saw the last episode on YouTube, I kind of really went off on what's going on with the Capitals right now, because I hear all the fans on Twitter and YouTube, and some people agree, and some people are telling me you're being too hard on the Capitals. They're going to find a way to get it done. And then when you hear Chris Patrick saying that, we really don't plan on doing much of anything unless something kind of good falls into our lap, because we don't want to mortgage the farm. And I get that. I don't want to mortgage the farm either. But like I said, here's where I push back. Injuries explain why things are harder. They don't, however, explain why the Caps haven't won back-to-back games since early December 3rd, if memory serves. Because good teams, truly good teams, find structure. Good teams simplify. And instead, what did we see? Lines constantly shuffled. Spencer Carbery doing his darndest to try to get some chemistry out there. Or and what did we see? We saw on the second line there, it was Connor McMichael, Sordoff, and Leonard there for a bit, right? That was great. And then Sordoff gets injured, and that kind of gets derailed. So some things work. Matchups not working. The same mistakes repeating. And then you got placeholders, right? I'm talking Sonny Milano. I'm talking Hendrix Lapierre. And I know that people talk about the underlying numbers of Hendrix Lapierre, and they're not goals scored, but it's blah, 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 blah. Okay. For me, it's goals scored, assists, those kind of things. I understand that generating opportunities is great, all of that, but there's a lot of placeholders, if you will. To a certain extent, you could put Duhaime in there. He's muscle, but there's a lot of players that don't make a big enough impact to help this team. And even Patrick admitted, he said, quote, "It's hard for Carbery to put together a lineup that can match up and still generate offense," unquote. And to that, I would say, yeah, that's your job, Chris Patrick. You are the general manager of this team. It's not up to Spencer Carbery, who's the head coach, to staff the team. If you need to make a call up from Hershey, make a call up. We saw Miroshnichenko, who got involved in screening and almost deflecting there in the last game. But you got Ilya Protas. You got other guys that might make an impact. I'm not saying that it's going to fix all that ails this team, but if the plan is that we don't want to give up players to make trades right now, then I definitely would say a call-up is in order. And that's not a short-term problem either. That is a roster problem. Because you take a look at it, the Capitals are now, 24, 19, and 6 are still there, but it's slipping, right? I think that the Capitals got lucky to a certain regard that there's no team save Carolina that's really running away with it in the Metro. That a lot of the teams are underperforming what many people had projected. And those are things to factor in as well. And the Capitals, 54 points, within shooting distance of second place. The East is tight. No one is running away. I guess I'm going to say, Carolina's somewhat running away with it. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Standing pat is the biggest risk of all. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the third segment is the Capitals have to make a move, and they know it, because what are we going to do? We don't want to mortgage the farm because a lot is going to change next year. So are you as Capitals fans resigned to the fact that this team is not going to make it to the playoffs? I'll discuss all of that and much more straight ahead. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored job puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Sponsored job boosts your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. Listen, I get involved in the hiring and the firing at work, and it was a mess before we had Indeed. Now I have it where I work, and it is a game changer. You need Indeed as well. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results. Using Indeed sponsored jobs, listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/locked on. So just go to Indeed.com/locked on right now and support the show by saying you heard about it on the Locked On Capitals podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. And for all of you on TikTok, we are also on TikTok. Go to when you're on TikTok at Locked On Capitals. All right, in the final segment here, we're talking about deadline pressure builds, that there are these artificial lines in the sand or the snow, if you will, as the Olympics are coming up. And many around the NHL are saying that the teams around the NHL, the Caps included, are going to determine if they are in it, if they're out of it. Are these teams going to be buyers? Are there teams that are going to be sellers? And given the fact that the Metro, the Eastern Conference in particular, that there are teams, many teams that think they're in it, even if they're out of it, in my estimation. And they feel that way because, like I've said on this show, there is not a tremendous amount of separation. So what does that mean? There's not as many sellers. Everyone's a buyer. Everyone wants to improve their team because they all believe that they're in it, which makes the trade market a little tight. Of course, I talked about in the last episode that the Rangers sent out a letter to a lot of their fans and season ticket holders that were going back into this kind of rebuild phase again, that the players out on the ice are not going to cut it. They don't plan on offering Zibanejad, for example, an offer. So there are some teams that are going to be selling. I think more teams out west, but the Capitals definitely need to make a move, in my estimation, if they still want to be competitive in the 25-26 season. So let's get into that in the final segment. Segment 3, the Capitals have to make a move, and they know it. And this, for me, is where things get real. And Patrick said it plainly as well. He said, quote, "We are actively pursuing an addition," unquote. Okay, not kicking tires, not monitoring, actively pursuing. What does that mean? We know that the Capitals have been in on various players around the league, Quinn Hughes, Rasmus Anderson, and the feeling is, and Patrick mentioned this as much, is the Capitals have a lot of great talent that's developing, whether it's prospects, whether it's players in Hershey, and they don't start at the bottom, right? It's not like, we want to get a big player and the other team goes, hey, how about we get Hendrik Slop here and Sonny Milano? That's not where they start. If the Capitals are trying to make a trade, the other team is going to come back with, how about Hudson? How about Leonard? How about Miroshnichenko? These kind of guys. And, I understand it. I don't want to get in a position where we are going to mess this team up for years to come because we trade away the likes of a Hudson or a Leonard. Because to be clear here, those players are still growing into future really great players, right? And I think that, when you take a look at Hudson, for example, and this is going to sound funny, would I like Quinn Hughes on this team? Absolutely, right? But if it meant trading out a guy like Hudson, a guy like Leonard, regardless of who Quinn Hughes is, I don't want to do it because I think that the trajectory of this youth core on this team is worth it. So that is kind of why it's a dichotomous feel, kind of a two sides of the coin. I don't want the Capitals to be out of it this season. But on the flip side of the coin, I don't want the Capitals to mortgage the farm. I want them to win in 25-26. And on the other side, I don't want them to trade away all their assets. And that is a tightrope for Chris Patrick to walk, right? That, you want to get in this talent, but who are you going to give up, right? And I talk about pain. For me, if the Capitals are going to make a trade, it's going to be someone on the active roster. Cover your ears here. It could be the likes of a Connor McMichael, right? It could be a player like that's on the active roster, that's bundled together. And that's what I ultimately see happening. I mentioned it in segment 1 that I think that Hendrik Slop here is on this team because he's a former first rounder and most certainly would not clear waivers. So they'll bundle him in a deal. I could see a deal like a Duhaime and Hendrik Slop here and perhaps like a Connor McMichael to get an upper echelon player. To kind of just give you a pulse, to stick your toes in the water. That's what it's going to look like, right? And that still would not have netted you a guy like Quinn Hughes, but it's going to get someone better in my estimation, right? And Connor McMichael, of course, the bright and shining piece on there. Now, the thing of it is to consider. People are like, Dan, do you remember what kind of season Connor McMichael had last year? I do. I know all of those things. However, there's going to be some pain associated to make your team better. So when you hear Spencer Carbery saying not kicking tires, not monitoring, actively pursuing, he nailed the need. A high-end skilled winger or center, in my estimation. And I stand pat with what I've always said, that I think that the Capitals need 2 forwards and a defender. It could be a center and a winger and a defender. Because this isn't new. You remember last summer when there was kind of a buzz around Nikolai Ehlers, and they weren't able to close it down, right? They weren't able to close the deal. He chose to go to Carolina. And you think to yourself, 34 points in 47 games last checked, that is exactly what the Capitals are missing. Now, off the top of my head, I do not remember the nature of the deal between Nikolai Ehlers and Carolina and what that all meant. But, if it meant, someone of that caliber right now, I still, even if it was a Nikolai Ehlers, I would not want to give up a Hudson. I wouldn't want to give up a Ryan Leonard. So that's what makes it exceedingly difficult for Chris Patrick. And I'm hard on him. But I try to be a straight shooter here as well, that, he doesn't want to do a dumb thing. You guys all remember Philip Forsberg, right? And you remember that horrible trade. And I think the stink of that trade kind of lingers around the Capitals organization as the Capitals got next to nothing in return. And you see what kind of guy Philip Forsberg turned out to be playing for Nashville, right? That you don't want to make a trade like that to push all your chips in win now mode, and then just, get a Martin Erat and a Michael Lotta. It's maddening. Lotta turned out to be the better deal there. But anyway, getting back to, what Ehlers would be, 34 points in 47 games, that would be great for the Capitals. But now here's the tension. Patrick also said, quote, "We're not going to trade away our top guys for something that won't have the impact we need," right? And one of the things that he talked about is sometimes you see rental, like, a player like, well, he's only got, this year left on his contract. It's a rental. Chris Patrick also mentioned that the Capitals, if they like the player, would also entertain the idea of an extension. So sometimes when you think rental, think a trial period, if you will, and if they can come to terms with some sort of extension. But when Chris Patrick said we're not going to trade away our top guys, who's he talking about? Cole Hudson, untouchable in my opinion. Ilya Protas, untouchable. Leonard, of course, untouchable. And honestly, I agree. But here's the hard part for me. You cannot wait forever. Ovechkin is 40. This is the final year of his deal. I've stood pat with thinking this is his final year playing for the Capitals in the NHL, but even if it isn't, he's 40 and not getting any younger. And when people point to the 0.01% of players like Jaromir Jagr that play till that's not the norm. And I don't think that stirs the drink for Ovechkin. He's checked a lot of the boxes. Is it possible he comes back for a season or two? Sure. But I still am kind of leaning into the fact that this is his final year in the NHL. And what has Chris Patrick done? That we're worried about Hudson. We're worried about these young guys because of the future. With that said, you're resigned to the fact that the Capitals probably will not make the playoffs in what could be Alex Ovechkin's final year. Excuse me, Patrick says Ovi is focused now on, quote, trying to get into the playoffs and have another shot, unquote. What I'm going to say is that would be something, wouldn't it, right? If the Capitals could somehow, some way find a way into the playoffs. But as we record this right now, or Stanley Cup for that matter, it seems like a long shot. But his comments, that matters. The front office is trying to do two things at once. Give Ovi one more real run, number one. And like I said, the other side of the coin, not burn the future. That's a tightrope, but maybe something that could be used for leverage to get Ovi to try to come back. Like, hey, we missed it this year, but this offseason, I'm going to try to get this guy and that guy. And if Ovi really believes it and he thinks it's a possibility, anything's possible. But doing nothing, that helps no one. Because what we've learned over the last, 20 or so games is this: the roster as constructed is not good enough to be dangerous in April. And to that, I say that is with Tom Wilson in there. That's with Pierre-Luc Dubois in there. That's with Sordoff in there. That is the complete cast of characters, the roster that was there in game one. It's a good lineup with Wilson in there, Sordoff, Chychrun, these kind of guys that have missed time this year. However, it is still not good enough. Still, after Wilson is back and all the other players are back, I still think two forwards and a defender away from being serious, dangerous in April. They're competitive. They're hanging around. They're surviving, but they're not imposing their will. The trade deadline is March 6th. If you wait until then, My fear is that we're still mid-January here, that the Capitals will be too far out of it unless somehow, some way they go on a tremendous heater. And between now and then, the Capitals have to decide who they are. A team content to hang in there or a team to push the chips in carefully, smartly, but decisively. Because right now, this season is drifting and the Caps don't have time to drift anymore. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily, your own podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You, as a matter of fact, are what makes this show go. But if you are one of those that listen on a daily basis, the everydayers, first of all, thank you very much. The Everydayer Club, though, is built just for you. Go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. That is lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. What do you get? An ad-free version of the show, plus members-only Discord access and more. If you are a part of the all-access tier, you can text me back and forth. Try not to do it after a really late hour, but during the day, text away with your thoughts on the Capitals. I'll give you my thoughts on it. Plus, you get access to podcasts that aren't published on the regular feed. I just had the Hockey Troll from the Caps Chirp podcast on there. That is available on there as well. There's so much to like. Check out your options. LockedOnCapitals.supercast.com. There's also a link in the show notes. So for those of you on the video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube on the audio side. Make sure and make your second listen NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI, and I'll talk to you again next time.